APTN Investigates delivers impactful, Indigenous-focused stories that change lives and reveal the bigger picture. On this week's show,
Indigenous people across the country are calling for more financial transparency in their communities. But what can individual band members do on their own to gain access to records? Find out more on Stonewalled.
APTN Investigates, Friday, immediately following APTN National News.
Tonight on Nation to Nation, the federal budget doesn't come close to removing the inequities for Indigenous peoples.
Canada stopped producing the penny in 2013. We still got pennies for this budget.
Aamjiwnaang First Nation sits in the heart of Chemical Valley near Sarnia, Ontario. Pollution levels have meant telling members to stay inside due to extreme benzene levels.
The levels are increasing, and they were at about the highest point yesterday was 150.
Anim, welcome to Nation. I'm Annette Francis. Indigenous reactions to the federal budget announced this week have been unanimous and huge disappointments. The inequities in infrastructure, health, and food security expose the need of billions of dollars for Indigenous communities. Weeks ahead of the budget announcement, NDP MP Lori Idlout had been warning that funding cuts would hurt Indigenous programs. NDP MP Lori Idlout is with me now. Welcome to Nation.
Thank you for having me.
So Indigenous leaders have expressed disappointment over this federal budget. What's your thoughts?
I share the same frustration, absolutely, because we know that for too many decades there's been not enough investments to improve the lives of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis. And this budget doesn't seem to indicate that there's going to be that much more investments to ensure that we're able to lift ourselves up so that we can help contribute to Canada's economy.
Does this budget help to close any gaps?
There are one of the things that brought me to an analogy is that even though the penny even though Canada stopped producing the penny in 2013, we still got pennies for this budget. Less than 1% of this budget will help to alleviate the infrastructure gap, which is way too much. It's over 475 billion in the infrastructure gap, and there's only about 9 billion in investments, which is less than 1% of what we need to make sure that Indigenous peoples can live with the same quality of life as other Canadians.
How does the lack of infrastructure investments and food security investments affect Inuit communities specifically?
Well, it definitely keeps us marginalized. It keeps us on the fringes. So children, even if there's the national school food program that's been announced, they're still going to have to sleep in overcrowded homes. They're still going to have to sleep in moldy conditions with their homes. So children will still suffer even if there's a breakfast program in the school for them. School facilities like the one in Igloolik which was built in 1960s, which has needed renovations for years, will not get the improvements that it needs. So schools will still need, there are too many schools that need improvements, too many schools that need to be replaced, that children will still go to school with more hurdles than Canadian children.
How do you feel about the fact that 23 million over 5 years of the food security money is going to Nutrition North, in spite of the fact there have been problems with that program and a review has not been complete?
It just means that when it comes to Indigenous peoples, that the Liberal government doesn't see alleviating poverty as a priority. It means that the Liberal government still wants to help corporate greed by supporting them instead, because that equals to 23 more million going to for-profit companies rather than alleviating poverty.
According to Minister Haidu, the budget is not all bad. There are investments of $5 billion in loan guarantees, which would help Indigenous communities invest in natural resource and energy products. Do you agree with this? Does this help bridge some of the equity gaps?
Not at all. When you think about what loans do, it's not what Indigenous peoples need. Indigenous peoples need grants, they need programs so that they can be part of decision making that helps so that they can address more severe issues like making decisions about housing, making decisions about water infrastructure. There are many very basic needs that are not going to be met when they're only going to commit to things like loan programs where First Nations, Métis, and Inuit will have to give that money back.
What more is needed in this budget to steer closer to reconciliation?
Like not even meeting the basic infrastructure needs will be enough. So there has to be much more major investments. The First Nations infrastructure gap is way too high. Inuit infrastructure gap is way too high, and there needs to be a better sense of commitment to say, for Canada to say, if Canada's relationship really is that important, if reconciliation is really that important, they need to show the investments to make sure that reconciliation can be real action, that Indigenous peoples are alleviated from the poverty that they continue to be forced to endure.
Were you surprised at all with this federal budget?
There were a couple of very small surprises. For example, I'm very glad that because of the work of the NDP, we were able to extend Jordan's principle beyond its sunset year. We were able to fight for a specific project to get some Nunavut communities off of diesel, to make sure that there's the Kivalliq hydro fiber link, so that work towards getting that project completed can continue. So there were some small surprises that we got, but they were nowhere near enough of what we need.
Okay, there was 1.5 million for the red dress alert. What's your thoughts on that?
Same analogy with the pennies. Pennies were stopped being produced, yet we get pennies for missing and murdered Indigenous women and for the red dress alert. I'm so thankful to the great leadership of my colleague MP Lori Idlout, who continues to advocate fiercely to make sure that we're doing better to protect Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit people. And we need to show that we care, and 1.2 million is not enough to make sure that we can have a system that protects them better. The Red Dress Alert is a very important initiative that we we're able to use, but if that's just the investment for this year, there's going to be too much work to make sure that our systems can be updated to be able to use it to better protect Indigenous women and girls.
Okay, Miigwech, thank you for joining us. Coming up, toxic leaks in Chemical Valley are forcing people indoors.
I'm Kathleen Martins, a reporter with APTN News. Homeless, houseless, shelterless people, they aren't hard to find in Winnipeg. They're on the sidewalks, in bus shelters, and down alleyways. They're living in tents and squatting in empty buildings. They're even sleeping in abandoned cars. But who are they? Hear their stories in my new 5-part podcast called Our Relatives. Listen on your favorite player.
Ani, welcome back. Amjanong First Nation is a Chippewa community located on the St. Clair River near Sarnia, Ontario. It is also home to 40% of Canada's petroleum refineries and energy facilities. The area is known as Chemical Valley and is one of the worst pollution hotspots in Canada due to emissions from toxic air pollution. Yesterday, some residents were being told to stay indoors to protect themselves from extremely high levels of benzene. Chief Chris Plain joins me now. Welcome, Chief.
Thank you for having me, Annette.
How are the levels in the community now?
Well, the levels were extremely high yesterday, but we had north winds. So today the winds are a little bit in our favor. So the monitors wouldn't pick up the readings because industry is across the road, and the monitors are on our side of the road, so they don't pick them up. You know, unless there's a prevailing north wind. So, but they were extremely high yesterday when we exercised caution, and they were getting higher over the last few months. We've noticed, and so with that, that unexplained presence of higher readings, we exercised caution and we sent our staff home on the north side of the building, which is directly adjacent to the refinery in question.
Has anyone gotten sick from it?
Yes, yeah, we are experiencing multiple reports, and our health center is creating some forms for community members and staff to do some testing, and they're lining up testing, blood testing, I believe, with they're going to try to do it at our health center or in conjunction with the local health unit. So, but people are experiencing symptoms related to dizziness, nauseous, stinging eyes. I guess those are some of the symptoms that we were commonly hearing yesterday.
Wow. What happened? Do you know where the high levels are coming from?
Yeah, well, there's been a leak identified, and this has been going on now for about 3 years. And since we've installed the monitors, and so over Easter, we've recognized that there's been higher levels. There was actually Ministry of Environment officials yesterday monitoring, and nobody sounded any alarms. So no alarms went off, which was, we're trying to understand why that was. Because normally when there's a release of some sort, we're provide notifications, and then you know it involves the local county and the municipality, but nobody was notified. So what we discovered was on our own on a public website that shows the reading levels of the monitors that are in our area, and there's like six surrounding our community, and the one was picking up very high levels. And since we've brought it to their attention, the levels are increasing, and they were at about the highest point yesterday was 150, and then there was another reading of 115, and readings in the 70s and 80s. The other monitors are obviously relatively low. So it was just the one that was adjacent to our community, or sorry, our band office, which is fence line to industry. I'm looking at it right now at my window.
You've just met with Ontario's Ministers of the Environment and Indigenous Affairs. How did that meeting go?
They expressed concern, as we did, that there was no notifications, so they committed to deploying resources. But our council, is extremely concerned, as is many of our community members who are, understanding that there is something situation going on that is very serious. So with that, our council is now going to take, additional steps tomorrow. We're going to meet with our legal team and consider all of our options, including an injunction to have this process stopped until they're able to repair it. Uh, we've um, we've participated in plenty of studies, and so there was a large study done in our area to which our community had a third party review. And so our third party review outlined some steps and some recommendations to implement to the industry to lower these higher than normal readings that have been showing up over the last 3 years. They've been getting worse now in the last few weeks, and we've noticed that. And so that prompted us to make yesterday's call to allow our staff to go home and advise community members to stay away from our outdoor recreation area, which is located beside the band office as well. So we have three administration buildings, a shelter, and our public works building, which is in the vicinity of this monitor. And to exercise caution, we sent them all home yesterday to work from home.
What types of resources are needed?
Well, we need we need enforcement for the regulations and the standards that are set for industry. So if they're allowed to emit past any standards set, and they're only uh, you know provided monetary fines, those monetary fines are within their budgets. So there's not going to be any repairs. We've been noticing a lot of the large industries, the refineries have been making changes, for the better and trying to comply. But this particular industry, they are not, complying, and they don't seem to be making any efforts um, to repair whatever is causing this particular leak. And so our council has asked for a complete shutdown of that industry until they can repair it and satisfy our community that it's been repaired to the fact or to the point where we don't have to exercise the cautions that have been exercised over the last 2 days.
These types of issues have been going on for years now. Why has it been falling on deaf ears?
Well, the will of the government, to hold industry to the standards that they set. Um, you know, Industry is a major player in this country, and we understand that they have a standing, but so does our lives, and our human health has been affected, and we're making serious cases to make that known. Now, a lot of the people in our county, are understanding our plight, and we've made some efforts to have cooperative studies done. But it's fallen on deaf ears of the governments of the day, and this is past two different governments. So this isn't just one particular government. We've had provincial governments here under both in my leadership, and yet we've seen nothing. No serious efforts made to enforce industry to this standard. So industry, this particular one does not seem to have any regard for our community. And so, they'll operate as the government allows them to.
What have been some of the long-term effects of living in Chemical Valley?
Well, we have a lot of studies done to support the fact that we have a high rate of cancer, we have high rates of asthma, we have high rates of learning disabilities amongst our children. So some of these are attributed to the exposures to the air, to the emissions, but also the mental health aspect of our community. Not having anybody there in government to protect us, not having anybody looking out for us. It is weighing on a lot of the younger generation, in our community, who are wondering who is there to help us as we become more aware of the surroundings around us and what they're doing to us by the studies that we're conducting. So it is really, really challenging to have the younger generation, believe that we're heading towards a better path, as we follow these deaf ears from the government, as we see these situations when we're not even notified, that we had to self-notify ourselves that this was happening. And enough is enough. And we are here not in an effort to pick an industry to pick on today, because as you indicated in your introduction, 40% of Canada's chemicals are refined here in our territory. And I'm not talking about a territory, a large vast territory. I'm talking about a small municipality, within kilometers radius. So, we are not just here to pick on one industry for the day, and it isn't an environmental situation that we're bringing to attention. It is a situation that is now compromising the health of our community members today and this generation. This isn't long term. A long term exposure will create long term effects of this chemical. So we're looking for some answers, and we want it rectified and corrected.
In the immediate time frame, how soon would members be able to get back outside?
As soon as we're comfortable and we have, in community monitoring, the monitoring was only taking place on the perimeter. So we have no idea how far, in the community, the impacts may have affected, residents, in houses. We have stores, close by as well. And, we have a school, we have a daycare, we have PSW services. So a lot of these, we have no idea whether or not they were affected. because we have no means to test individual houses. So, if we can get these monitoring trucks back here, in the within the perimeter of the community to detect whether or not there's readings that high. The readings we take are from the perimeter of the community, but our community is not a very large land base, so we can't think that it hasn't traveled, further in, but we have no idea when. So as soon as we get some wins that pick up and pick up the latest readings, we're satisfied allowing our staff to work at home and recommending our community members for their own safety stay inside, because this is a scientific data to share with people on those exposure limits. We don't have that data. We need government resources to share with us, Ministry of Health to share with us about these long-term exposures. On the other side of the road in the chemical valley, all of their workers are trained. They're all protected from this particular chemical. But and I'm closer to the refinery than the people in the same refinery on the other side of the refinery. That's how close we are here. And so our people aren't required to wear this PPE because we don't manufacture these chemicals. So these staff that we see on the other side of the road walking are wearing masks and monitors, if they're even in this area, which they don't seem to be, that we don't see them. So why are we any different on the other side of the road is, some of the questions we have for the minister. And why isn't your obligation to protect us the same as it is to protect them?
Okay.
These are the tough questions that we're asking.
All right. Miigwech, thank you, Chief, for joining us.
Okay, miigwech, aha.
Stick around after the break. We'll give you a roundup of other happenings on Parliament Hill.
APTN presents a captivating journey into the heart of the North with our latest podcast, The Place That Thaws.
Some areas that used to be safe are no longer safe.
Hosted by me, Danielle Parody. Join us as we uncover the intricacies of life on a changing coast. Subscribe and listen to The Place That Thaws.
Welcome back. Before we go, here's a few other things that happened in Parliament. On Tuesday, the House's Committee on the Status of Women continued its study of red dress alerts. The conversation between members of Parliament and witnesses was about how best to implement the alerts.
Because I think this study, what we really want to see come out of this study is how to effectively implement it. I think we've all agreed this is necessary, important. We were there. Now it's the sort of logistics. The threshold of time. Let's talk about this. If you have a recommendation that you'd like to see in the report, do you have one?
Yeah, that's a difficult one just because it is important to get the word out right away. Mm-hmm. But we need to take into consideration these women that for safety reasons don't want to be found. But I think there's no problem with being alerted right away, whether they want to disappear or not. Mm-hmm. I think we need to err on the side of caution and better safe than sorry.
Earlier this month, NDP MP Charlie Angus announced he would not seek re-election. He has been a tireless advocate for First Nations in his riding, and despite his pending retirement from Parliament, he was supporting the Cree Nation of Attawapiskat during question period earlier this week.
The honourable member from Timmins James Bay.
For years, people in Attawapiskat have lived in mold-filled homes, sheds, and even tents on a tiny plot of land. This is because the feds and Doug Ford refused to transfer land so they can build the homes they need. The Liberals would rather protect the land interests of the mining giant De Beers, a corporation that made $21 million from the sale of a single diamond in Attawapiskat. They're putting the interests of De Beers ahead of people who desperately need safe homes. When will the Liberals stop stalling and give the land back to the Cree of Attawapiskat? Good question.
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you very much. much, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the member opposite for his years of advocacy for the rights of Indigenous people, including for the people of Attawapiskat. As the member notes, Attawapiskat is currently landlocked. Indeed, they're looking for more land to build those necessary houses to help the community grow. I've been communicating with the province of Ontario, who currently is the owner of the land, and we will continue to ensure that Ontario understands the urgency of this work.
That's all for this week's Nation to Nation, and if you missed any part of tonight's show, you can check out our podcasts. Go to aptnnews.ca/podcast. Miigwech and have a good night.
Hello, I'm Rick Harp, host of APTN News Brief, a daily podcast version of the nightly broadcast of APTN National News. Available on all major podcast platforms, APTN News Brief is your quick way to hear the headlines every weekday morning. Learn more at aptnnews.ca/podcasts.